Yeah.
Well, good. Well, yeah, thanks for joining us tonight. So this is going to be a one part of a two-part workshop, and we're just tonight especially going to get familiar with what a rule of life is. And so as I posted in Facebook and some other places, a rule life is basically it's a kind of a living worksheet to help you think through the different rhythms of your life. So at this time of year, a lot of us are familiar with goal setting, and that's part of this, but it really is like the broader picture to help you, follow Jesus in every area of your life, and so that you come up with this kind of organic structure, organic rhythms that reinforces who Jesus is growing you into. And so, just before we get started, are how much into like goal setting are all of you? Are you big goal setters? Are you like, hey, at the beginning of the year, I set aside time and I really go in deep, or is it more of like, I've always meant to get around to that, but I've never really thought through it too much? I'm just curious of your experiences.
I guess
Go
I'll
for it.
mute first. It's always the awkward part about being on Zoom camp. Um, I'd say overall, throughout my whole life, I've always been big on goals. SMART objectives, OKR is just something that you can easily track, measure, because otherwise, if you don't have a strong foundation, it's not going to go anywhere.
Yeah.
I would say ever since COVID really started, my final semester, so this past spring, it's kind of went out the window for me. I still have in the back of my mind, okay, like when New Year's came around, all right, here's kind of my New Year's resolutions, but I haven't really made them concrete because I'm just like, we don't really know what's going to happen anymore.
Right, right. No, that's so true. It's been hard to, plan, and it's hard to plan for a year where you're not sure what the next 6 weeks really hold. And so I did that for a while where it's like all my planning is out the window because I'm just kind of riding the wave of whatever comes. So I relate to that. Kayleen, what about you?
Yeah, I am a big goal setter
Mm-hmm.
planner. I have a vision board
Yeah.
that's hung in our room, and it stares at me every day
Mm-hmm.
to
Mm-hmm.
remind me of kind of what I want to work towards.
Yeah.
So as a new time mom, that's kind of has put on hold in a
Yeah.
sense.
Yep.
But I want to still be able to work towards it because my daughter's watching. So I
Yeah.
want her to know that you can still reach for those goals. So
Yeah.
I'm definitely a goal setter and dream caster.
Mm-hmm.
So
That's good. And my hope is because both of you are kind of in a new phase of your life, like there are just new transitions and you're trying to get new rhythms and practices and things like that. My hope is that I haven't really retweaked any strategy or things like that. So I'm kind of I'm in the same boat as you all, as needing some fresh like approaches to some things. And my hope is that we can come out of this with, like I said, this living document that no matter what the future, because we can't control anything that happens in our world or really in our lives, even a lot of things seem to happen to us, but what we can control is how we respond to them. And the hope is through the strength of these practices, we can endure a lot more, even if we have to like pivot, right? That's kind of like the word of 2020, right? And 2021 it's kind of no different, right now, but hopefully these practices allow us the fluidity to accommodate whatever's going on in our life. So whether we're going through a move or a new job or, new family dynamics, any of that, that these practices can help us weather that and actually become a place of strength. And so you don't look back like 6 months and your vision board hasn't been touched, and you just feel all this condemnation or this like, what am I doing with my life? It's just simple things instead that is like, hey, I may not have tackled any of the like the bucket challenges that I had, any of those bucket goals that I had, but day by day, I see myself in these consistent practices where I'm traveling and journeying closer to Jesus, and that's the strength that I can do the other big things when I can get around to them or when they present an opportunity. So let's dive in. So if you haven't downloaded this, it's no problem. But basically, what I want to do is go through this rule of life worksheet. And so this is from a church called Bridgetown in Portland. And so they put this together. They've got their own spin on this. And basically we're going to go through a bit of this tonight, and anytime you have a question or have a thought, like make sure to throw that in, because I don't want just this to be me talking at you. I really want us to like dialogue around some of these things. So I'll stop every once in a while and ask a question or see if you all have any questions about it. But I want to give some background, right? So what is a rule of life? And a rule of life is a schedule and a set of practices and relational rhythms. So I like that, a set of practices and then also relational rhythms. So it's a community aspect that we need to roll into this, because a lot of our goal setting tends to be really kind of individualistic. And if we get around to sharing our goals or our dreams with anybody, it's usually there's not really any accountability or any questioning built around that. But this really has relationships at its core, as it does personal, responsibility in that. So, and it helps create space in our busy world for us to be with Jesus, to become like Jesus, and then to do what Jesus did, so we could live a life to the full. And that's you'll hear me. I've kind of got this language picked up from Bridgetown. That's the basic dimensions of formation and discipleship is to be with Jesus, to be like Jesus, and to do what Jesus did. So it's looking at all these different aspects of life and looking at our discipleship journey, our journey with Jesus to become more like Jesus, and using all those aspects of our life leverage in that way. So and so we want to see that, and then they finish this thought up with in alignment with our deepest passions and priorities. So it's a holistic aligning with God. So while the word rule may strike you as a strict or binding constraint, so and I don't get that as much from you two, but there are people in our lives that we would say are more spontaneous, more, don't nail me down. I want to just kind of live free and open. And so when they hear rule or they hear schedule, it's like, nope, I'm not doing any of that. But although it might be binding, the Latin word we translate rule was originally the word for trellis in a vineyard. So in the same way a vine needs a trellis to lift it off the ground so it can bear the maximum amount of fruit and keep free of predators and diseases, we need a rule as a kind of support structure to organize our life around abiding in the vine. So we need the growth and freedom of the vine, but we need the structure and predictability that the trellis provides. So when those two work together, like if you go out to liquid art or something like that, right? They don't have the grapevines laying on the ground. You've got them trained up on a trellis, and that's how you produce the grapes. That's how you produce wine. That's the maximum fruitfulness, is when you have someone tending to both the spontaneity of growth and also the planned intentionality of the trellis. It's been said that we achieve inner peace when our schedule is aligned with our values. A rule of life, and let me just highlight that, right? Inner peace. Isn't that what we need right now? Like that's really what a lot of us are really pining for. How do I find peace in these anxious times? Well, like I said, it's not out there because we can't control that. But what we can control is the trellis work, and to some degree the vine work in our lives. And when we have that aligned with our values, we can achieve peace in Jesus. So a rule of life is simply a tool to that end. Rather than a rigid, legalistic to-do list, it's a life-giving structure for freedom, growth, and joy. So we've got a website where this the link took you here, but there's other resources. There's some podcasts and stuff like that about just continuing the thought there if you all are interested in that. So there's an Anglican priest. She says this: a good rule can set us free to be our true and best selves. It is a working document, a kind of spiritual budget. And I like that, right? If we have a budget for our money, we're going to tell our money where to go. We're going to inform ourselves how we spend it. And so a spiritual budget helps us to be intentional about our time and attention, resources, etc. Not carved in stone, but a subject to regular review and revision. It should support us, but never constrict us. Okay. So how to use this workbook, how we're going to go through this. And so there'll be, like I said, some overview on on my part and our part, and then there'll be some stuff that you do on your own. And then next week we'll just follow up and touch base with each other. How's that going? Share some of your the things in the different categories that you came up with, some of that stuff. So what we want to do is look over the rule of life chart. And so there'll be a chart with some different categories, and we'll spend a little time contemplating it. And that's what we'll do between this week and next week, considering how it relates to different areas of your life. And then on the following pages, prayerfully work through each life category one at a time, giving yourself a little time to list out your current practices and to imagine what a more intentional rule of life could look like for you in this season. And then draft your rule of life, come back to the chart, fill it in, and then we'll try it out. Okay. So we'll give ourselves permission to basically look at what between 3 and 12 months looks like, right? Actually, this part is spending a few weeks living into the rule. So you live a few weeks, and then at the end of next week, we'll even name maybe a person or two that we can talk with over our rule of life as we try it out. We'll see how it feels. We'll see, what seems boring, what's not life-giving, what gives us a lot of life. Is there some restructuring of our schedule? I, in fact, just read a pastor that I follow on Twitter where he has a coach, and the coach helped him look through how he spends his day. And he said he just tweaked some of the practices that he does. He put something that he had last up front, and it just re-energized his whole day. So there's some things like that in your rule of life where you can experiment with. Maybe it makes sense for you to get up first thing in the morning and spend some time in devotion, spend some time in the Bible. Maybe if you're a new mom, that's just not going to happen. And that's just the realistic, season of life that you're in. When you're up because you have an alarm clock down the hall and you're not getting anything done for the first hour except that nurture. But that's a part of the rule of life. That can just be like my first hour spent with my daughter, feeding and hanging out and doing skin time and all that necessary stuff. That there's no problem with that. But what we want to do is just look at those different categories and go, okay, if that's that's the fact of the matter, then how do we do some, if that's maybe not as life-giving, maybe that's draining. It's a good thing, good things don't, anyway, I won't get off on that, but you know what I mean. What are some things in our budget, our spiritual budget, that we can factor in that helps pour into us and helps give us more energy throughout the day? For me, first thing in the morning isn't necessarily the best time for me to do Devo, because first thing in the morning, I'm getting kids ready for school. So I'm in a similar boat. But what I need is right after that, I'm going to go to the gym or I'm going to spend some time in personal devotion. But it's taken me a while to figure that out. So we're going to test drive this, right, for a few weeks, and then talk with somebody about what that means, and then revise and commit. And then based on step 4, what we'll do is take between 3 months to 12 months and just say, hey, I'm going to do this. Come snow or sunshine or rain, day in and day out, to the best of my ability. I'm going to stick to this spiritual budget, this rule of life, and I'm going to practice these rhythms regularly. Not 100%. No one's perfect. Only Jesus is. But if we're hitting, I'd say about 80% week in and week out, that's pretty darn good, actually, for what, seasons of life that we're all in. So let me hit pause. Do you guys have any questions or any thoughts on that? Any things where you're like, man, I really like that part. That makes a lot of sense to me. I haven't tried that out. Or, hey, I have tried that out. I just need to get back to that regularly.
Nothing crazy for me. I mean, I do kind of like how they list out the steps because, in the past, especially the goal setting, it's like you feel that you have to commit. So actually, it's telling you, hey, just come back to this document when you see fit, get it in, test run it for a couple weeks, see what you need to revise, and after that, then you commit.
Yeah.
Rather than going full steam ahead, and then at the end, either you're not giving 100% or your full attention to that goal that you set in the past, or it just completely vanished. So I think builds a stronger foundation. So I kind of really like the way they worded and said.
Good.
I mean, you're going to hear my daughter in the background, but
no problem.
I do like number 4, where it's like, you're kind of giving yourself grace. Like you're, like in my mind, I'm like, okay, fill the chart out in pencil and not pen. So knowing that, okay, like this is going to move around, and trying to like try everything the first time and then see if it needs to be shifted. And but yeah, just kind of giving yourself grace in the fact that, you know, it's not going to be perfect the first go round.
Yeah. Yeah. That's good. I feel like so many of us just need that permission to go, this is going to be less than perfect, and that's okay. You know,
Yeah.
maybe try it through the summer, maybe try it through however long, you know, or give yourself permission if you fall off, you know, the bike, then after a month you go, okay, I'm getting back on, you know, and that's okay. I love the flexibility in that. I love, because there might be some things that even work for 3 weeks, and you go, okay, they're in pencil, they're down, and then you find out 6 months later, it's like, I have to change that. That's not working. That's not realistic at all, you know? And so, yeah, good. Well said.
And it's true with a kid, because you realize
Yeah,
what works for me right now for a 6-month-old is not going to work for me when she becomes older. And
that's it.
you know, then
Starts
Austin comes,
walking, and, you know, it's all over the place, and you're tired, and
put
yeah,
a leash on her, say no.
that's right. Just leash her and Link together, and then, you know, you guys
So
just watch each other, please. Yeah.
it's a terrible idea.
Yeah. Well, good. Well, let's dive back in here. Okay, so let's think about life categories here. Life categories are different, just parts of what makes you you. And so we don't want to just say there's the spiritual part of us, and that's the most important. And then there's the soul part, that's our internal world. And then there's all the lesser than spiritual stuff. That's a bad way to think about the different partitions of our life. Like, Jesus wants us to live holistically. And so we're a soul, we're a body, we're a spirit, right? We have all those parts to us, and they all really matter. And so you could quibble about different categories and what to call them. And in fact, if you come to one and go, I like this word for this a little bit better, that's okay. You can change it. It's this is really what works for you. This is what Bridgetown has just labeled or decided these 7 parts. You could even argue about taking like gospel and hospitality or work and money and separating those two. That's completely fine too. It's just really up to what works better for you. Let me explain how best I understand what they're talking about in these different categories, so that you can start to think about them as we look at the different, you know, things to do or accomplish or be in these categories. So first is abiding. That would be, you know, John 15, Jesus says, I'm the vine, you're the branches, abide in me, right? So this is the time, the energy, the attention, the resources that are needed to be with Jesus. So those might be things like, and what you'll find is there's a lot of overlap between all of these. And so one thing might fit better, but not best in one category, and that's okay. There might be something where it's like, I have 3 things to do in this one category, but 2 in this other one. I can kind of shift it down, and that's okay too. But abiding would be that your spiritual connectedness and your spiritual vitality of being with and close to Jesus, right? Mine would be obviously your intellect, your rationale, the thinking, even maybe creative part of who you are. Okay, body is your physical health, right? Things like your diet, exercise, sleep, things like that. And then relationships, obviously, just connectedness to other people. Rest would be just downtime, time away from work, time to recreate. I talked a little bit about this, I think 3, 4, 5 weeks ago, something like that, about like rest is meant to help us recreate who we are. And it's different than amusement, which comes literally from without inspiration. And so a lot of what we think of as rest is actually amusement, where we kind of binge watch or binge play video games or something like that. And that just kind of gets us into this like nothing zone. And I'm not opposed to that. It isn't helping recreate and bring rejuvenation and rest to us. So we want to think about that. Work and money, again, you could separate these, but this has to do with your vocation. vocational goals, how you spend your time, your quality even of relationships at work and your influence there, and then financial budget, economics, goal setting there, et cetera, et cetera. And then gospel and hospitality, they've tied together. Gospel is just how we're on mission, and we're on mission with Jesus in all of these areas. But gospel is specifically how we're sharing and how we're being the good news to other people around us in our lives. Hospitality is the opening up, not just of our home or table, or how we're spending time with people and, making the bundt cake or whatever it is. But hospitality is the opening up of ourselves to people who are unlike us. So those are the 7 categories where we'll go through and we'll look at how we're spending our time, attention, resources, money, things like that in these different areas. Okay. So this sheet we'll skip over. They've got their practices. They've identified 7 for their church, which I think is a brilliant idea, actually, of like, this is how our church intentionally spends its time, money, resources, attention to be with Jesus, like Jesus, and do the things that he's doing. So you can look at that, but that doesn't apply as much to us. But here's for all the chart geeks out there, kind of like me, this just breaks it down. And so you can think of, they've got their different categories of being with Jesus as abiding and mind, becoming like Jesus in body, relationships, and rest, and doing what Jesus did in work and money. This top part might be helpful. It might not be. You can either ignore it or help you to, elaborate on the different things in this chart. But these are the 7 areas that we just went through. And so as we develop our rule of life, we want to think about, we can't get everything that we want done every day, right? And we need to focus on some things, some bigger picture things more annually, to just lessen the pressure of having to do everything all the time. But there are probably things that we want to look at, such as abiding. Let's just give an example. Daily, abiding daily with Jesus would be, maybe I want to spend 15 minutes in prayer. And we would want to get specific. I know you guys are probably familiar with SMART goals. That doesn't perfectly correlate, but I think there does want to be some kind of measurable distinction here. So I want to spend daily 15 minutes with Jesus, and I want to do that at least 5 times a week, right? And so you get a little specificity in there, but you've also got some room to say, hey, I just did not get to that today, but my week is not blown because I've got the rest of the week, right? So there's some flexibility in there. It may be, let's see, rest. It may be, annually, I want to take a week vacation with my best friends or with my family. I want to make sure I do 5 days out of state with the people that matter to me most, right? And on that vacation, we're going to sightsee. We're going to lay on a beach. We're going to do all the favorite things that we love to do. And I'm not going to need a vacation from my vacation when I get home. You guys have a vacation like that every once in a while. It's like, that's not super restful. and I maybe half the time is spent doing stuff where it's like, stick to the schedule. But most of the time is just going to relax. I'm going to take in God's, beauty and creation, things like that. So those are ideas about, small picture and then big picture. And so there are different things in these different categories: daily, weekly, monthly, quarterly. For Manhattan, Kansas, I would even say semesterly. We tend to work by a semesterly schedule. So even there, you have some wiggle room, whatever you want to do, annually. So here's where, and we're not going to go through every one of these, but I wanted to give you an example of these 7 categories. So it's going to go a little bit into some detail, much like what I just gave kind of in that overview. It'll give some examples. And then what I really like is the recommended baseline practice, right? So this is where they say, we wouldn't do anything less than that. We think you push yourself as a follower of Jesus to do at least this. And in fact, if any of us just went through and copied the baseline practices and committed to doing those, we would be doing so much better probably than we already are. So there's no shame in that. But I'm going to give you also some examples of what I did. And this needs to be updated for me. I need to go through this a bit more, but this was for last year. And I think I did this maybe November, December of 2019. But I want to give you some examples that peek under the hood of my life for what I put into place. So again, for abiding, some examples there would be morning prayer, scripture reading, worship music, those sorts of spiritual, what we would say spiritual disciplines. And they would say, and I would agree with, committing as a baseline practice, daily quiet time. And what I love about this document is that takes digital consumerism into play, because I'm not sure about you guys, but I know for me, a lot of what is grabbing my attention and gets me off track from practicing a rule of life, or even, goal setting or whatnot, is the rabbit hole of social media or news, or just, hey, I need to look that up on Amazon real quick, or we're out of that, so I got to order it real quick. So it's going to take into account the digital consumerism that we're a part of, and it rolls that all together for us to consider. So, and then it gives some baseline practices for, like, if you're new to the faith, which you guys, not as much applying to you, but good to have in there. So the question here for us to consider in abiding would be, what practices make up your current rule of life? And so we have a rule of life. You have a way that you spend your time and you use your attention and your resources. In fact, if you got an iPhone, what you can do is open up your settings app and you can look at your screen time. And it is scary. I'm just going to give you a little peek at mine. I'm not going to let you see it because I'm a little embarrassed, because the last week there's been so much history that we've been through. So it does not count. But you can look at your activity and go, here's how I spend my time on my phone. And here's how that's been going over the last few weeks, et cetera, et cetera. But the question is, what practices make up our current rule of life? So that would be one piece of homework that I would encourage us to do over this next week. Really sit down in each of these areas and go, what do I currently do? And without judgment, without condemnation, just as an awareness practice, holding that in front of us. What are my current rules of life in the area of abiding? How often am I in the scripture? How often do I pray? How often am I a part of worship with other people, or even private worship when it's just me and Jesus? What practices then would I like to add in, cut out, or change? And so for me, in answering that question, I wanted to, and I think what I found was I did a little bit too much. Honestly, I bit off too much that I could chew. But it's hard when you kind of list this out to know what to cut or what to, like, prioritize, because it's all good. But I definitely wanted to spend 30 minutes a day reading scripture, meditating, and journaling. What I would probably do here is add in 5 times a week, and that's just more realistic for me. And so you can do that. You can add that as a part of your rule of life, where you get some specifics, but then, I've got some wiggle room in there. And then I have one day a week where I'm going to do like an extended, I just really get fueled and poured into when I put worship music on, and I'm in my office and I'm just worshiping Jesus. I want to do the examine twice a day. And again, I would do 5 times a week. I would give myself 2 days of wiggle room. If I do all 7, that's great. But I want to at least do 5. Practice Sabbath once per week. And I did that pretty well. But fasting digital devices, I really stunk on. And so I need to figure out how to do a better job of being prepared, because for me, I read so much, like on my Kindle. I need to be prepared more with hardbound books or paperbacks and have those ready. And so that's where I found myself falling off of this. I want to spend one day alone. I did not do this very well. I want to get better at this, but I want to spend one day alone with God per month. And then that's away from work, family, all the stuff. I just want to have like a solid 8-12 hours where I'm on a personal retreat, et cetera, et cetera. And then fasting once a week is a practice that I've done for several years, where I just want to abstain from food and anything but basically water and coffee, and give that time to God to see how He would speak to me. So that's an example for me of abiding. So let me pause there. Do you guys have any thoughts or any questions about abiding, or any of as you see kind of like the allotment of practices, that do you kind of see where this is going now? To have, like I said, that's a lot. I wouldn't do that many. I would maybe do 3 or so. But when you get you put down what you already have in your personal, maybe it's an unofficial rule of life right now, but you add a few, they start to really add up. If you had 3 on each one, that's 21 practices. And again, there's overlap, but that's a lot to kind of keep track of if you're not reviewing it. But anyway, does that make sense? Do you have any questions or comments on that?
I mean, I really like that. I mean, I like how you went through that and realized and kind of gave examples of it. And when you were talking about before about rest and how, like, yes, we could think that, because I mean, I'm guilty of this at the end of my day. I'm laying in bed and I'm scrolling through Facebook and I'm trying to shut my brain off. But I've noticed that there's times when if I read before bed, or if I'm doing something that's like more life-giving, I tend to sleep better.
Right.
And I never really analyzed that before. But that's kind of what I like about this, going through each of this, is realizing that, like, okay, really examine what you're doing and try to make it better.
Good.
Yeah,
that's good. Thank you, Kayleen.
Yeah.
And I agree 100% too. I really like, thank you for going through that. Kind of helps open some things up. And I think my camera died on way too in the middle of it. So sorry, you just got
That's okay.
a picture of me.
Yeah, we can still hear it. That's good.
But no, and it was just some, good eye opener too. It's just because you don't really think about it, especially being in the digital age. I've grown up with technology my whole life, and it is scary. But like Kayleen mentioned, doing something a little more productive, whether it's just like reading, or even for me folding some laundry, it's just a little more life giving. And once you get into that rhythm, it's definitely easier. And I was really good at that for a while, and then I started scrolling through Facebook when I was laying in bed, and I've definitely noticed a huge difference. So something to consider and kind of bring to surface, especially in today's time.
That's good. Thanks for sharing. Good. Let's go. Let's do, let's see. Let's do one more. Let me look at one real quick and see. My screen share isn't working here. You don't see anything different, do you? Do you guys still see me?
You're on the sidebar. It just says Josh has started screen sharing.
My Zoom app is kind of frozen, so that's weird.
Yeah, but you're still moving.
It's like you don't see the worksheet though. Oh, there we go. I got it. Okay, sweet. Good. Okay. Let me go through let me go through relationships, because we've got kind of a spectrum here that we could go through. I think again, what I really like about this rule of life is this isn't just about your personal goals as it pertains to just, bucket list, check off the tasks, accomplish. This really is to help foster deeper community as well. Just relationships, friendships, things like that. And so, of course, there are different dimensions when we talk about relationships. There's just so many relationships we're trying to manage at once. And especially during COVID, I think this is really important as we think about connection and relationships when we're distanced. How do we do a good job of being intentional around those? And so I just want to highlight that. I'm just going to read this. Okay. We're relational beings created by a relational God for relationship. What relationships form our community before God? Who do we walk the way of Jesus alongside? And what are we doing to create, nurture, and deepen relationships of vulnerability and accountability? You may find it helpful to think through the categories of friendship, church, marriage, and family. So I really like the 4 dimensions there of relationships. So this would be an example for a friendship: a weekly phone call or coffee with best friend, regular times to connect over a meal. For us, it might be a regular time, a weekly Zoom chat with, some of our closest friends, something like that. Examples for church: weekly meal with community. Might be like an after church, I'm gonna go out to lunch with people from church on Sunday. That's what I'm going to prioritize. Church on Sunday itself, I'm going to get there maybe about 15 minutes early just to connect, say hi to a new person, introduce myself, make sure they feel welcome. regular parties. And I love that. Jesus went to parties. Jesus had the best parties, right? And I know, again, during COVID, this is really tough, but how can maybe we host a digital game night or something like that with people from church. We serve together, pursue relationships along lines of class, ethnicity, etc. For marriage, 15-minute touch point per day, weekly date night, cultivating healthy sexual connection, regular getaways, et cetera, et cetera. I know for Sarah and me, we've tried for years, and we're not great about this, but we try and do two things. We try and do a weekly date night, and then we try and do a weekly like dreaming or kind of planning, just touch base for the week. Like, show me your schedule, I'll show you my schedule. Who needs to pick up the kids and what day? Things like that. That's a lot of times more practical than you would think it is spiritual, but man, it really helps communication and relationships when we just kind of have a 15-minute, 30-minute touch base beginning of the week. That's helpful for us. Family, sitting down to dinner 3 nights a week, a weekly Sabbath where you're together, daddy-daughter dates, annual vacation, family movie night, et cetera, et cetera. And then baseline practice would be committing to a weekly meal with your community, daily and weekly touch points, other family members, close family. So yeah, those are the things that have helped me think through that. So what practices make up your current rule of life? So how are you currently investing intentionally in relationships, official or unofficial? And then what practices would you like to add in, cut out, or change? So for us, I made a commitment years ago to be home and eat dinner with my family 4 times a week. We do a pretty good job of that. I also have, well, I don't have this in here, but also with this, I want to always be home for tuck-in time. So even on the days where like I'll have a meeting during dinner, so I'm away, I always try and be home by like 8:45, 9 o'clock, because I want to be there to help Sarah tuck in the boys, but also be there. So we get some of the greatest conversations are there, right before my kids are trying to go. They're actually trying to prolong going to sleep. Let's be honest, but it's me and them, and they're asking me questions or talking about our day. I get to pray with them and, talk about Jesus and things like that. So I want to be there both over meals and then for that tuck-in time. 2 dates a week. This actually, we've done okay on this. What this ends up looking like is a date night, and then we get like brunch throughout the week or something like that. So there's usually during the day type of deal, and then sometime at night. And then last year I started to take my boys like just one-on-one and do some like dad and son discipleship time, talk about the Bible, go get wings or something like that together. And then I have some intentionality around people that I'm discipling, just kind of one-on-one or 2-on-1 time where I'm investing in them. And it's not always like, tell me about what you're reading in the Bible. It's how's life going? Is there anything I can do to serve you? What's God teaching you? Just any of those kinds of questions. So for me, that's what it has shaken out to. So anyway, you guys have thoughts on the relationship side of things? I know you're both in unique situations where these don't all apply to you, but maybe you have some thoughts on how that might shake out for you two.
Now I can't see if Derek wants to say anything.
No, I was about to tell Mika, I'll let you go first.
You're good. Go for it. Okay. Just very quickly. I mean, I like how, I don't know, where it's like examples of family, granted, because we have, a family now. But like you were mentioning, like having like fellowship times, like with your sons and just doing stuff like that. Those are little things that I'm like super excited about.
Yeah.
Obviously I in a sense can do it. I've attempted it once where I was doing a devotional and she was on my lap, like she is now, and attempted to give her the pen and kind of read the scripture to her, which was nice. But like kind of having like trying to be more intentional when it comes to, yes, there's social distancing, but trying to apply, like you're saying, like Zoom, my brain just stopped, like game night and things like that.
Game night.
Yeah. or even like even with family or things like that, like trying to apply those ideas a little bit more, because all of our family is, in California or
Yeah.
different states now.
Yeah.
But trying to still like cultivate those like, date nights and things like that with Austin and exactly.
Yes.
Well said. But yeah.
That's good. That's good. And I find that a lot of times, because we're so busy, we're like, I would do that if someone else invited me, right? And I think
Mhm.
part of our thinking needs to shift to, we don't need to make it hard on ourselves, but just maybe I can be the one that initiates. Maybe I'll just put it out there and see who wants to do it. If no one is able to, that's fine. But at least I know I'm not going to wait to see who else would do that, right? And so again, for me, it's like part of it is just the initiation. Someone's just got to organize the thing or suggest it or something like that. Good. Derek, do you have any thoughts?
No, I really like that, and obviously, I'm single, not seeing anyone, not married, obviously, um, and I feel it's kind of the biggest adjustment. Even though I've been out of Manhattan since August, it's thankfully I'm connecting with some old friends that are still around that I've known in high school and that stuck around when I left and went to college, and just that connection, because I really missed that for the first couple months after moving back to Kansas City, because being in Manhattan for 5 years and being in the Well family for 2.5, just having that, hey, let's go grab a cup of coffee at Radina's, or being able to come to church in person, or attend DNA groups, stuff like that. And part of it does have to be self-discipline, because even though I am away physically, in the digital world, I can still connect, like pushing myself to you know make a visit up to Manhattan at least once a month on a Sunday to attend church in person, or you know link in on the Facebook Live, or make the initiative to reach out to members of the church to still have that community, because even though I'm away, and I have churches around me that I used to go to, I still love the family at the Well. And so I just can't get that connection anywhere else.
Yeah.
And kind of like you said, making the first step, with my core group of friends that I hang out with, it's really unorganized. It's like, off the cuff, where, hey, he wants to go grab dinner. Yeah, I'm down. And just being a yes man, where even when I was in college, when I prioritized work over, rest time or downtime or just time for myself, um, instead of saying no, I'm saying yes to more of these. Or if there's chat in our group chat, I'm just saying, hey, let's just shoot for this day, let's get this on paper, and just make shifting priorities around.
It's good. It's really good. Yeah. Yeah. I appreciate that we're all kind of thinking in that direction, and just, it's not that I do much differently than I'm already doing. It's just maybe a little bit more intentionality and thinking through what I want that to look like. So that's really good. Well, good. Well, I think we'll start to wrap up for tonight. So for next week, we'll meet at the same time. For next week, what I'd like you to do is take some time and um, hold this worksheet. You're welcome to print it out if you want to, if you'd like to write it down more, or you can do it digitally on the PDF thing. But think through in those different 7 areas, what some of those practices, maybe do that audit, maybe think about, what am I already doing? Maybe it's sporadic, maybe it's not as intentional, but what do I already do? And then what do I feel like the Holy Spirit is saying to cut out or do more of, or change up? And then what I would ask is, you don't have to fill it out all perfectly. Maybe have a couple ideas in each area, just to start thinking through that. And then we're just going to share next week about what we want our rule of life to look like, share a couple of those practices from those different areas. And then at the end of next week, maybe we'll be able to like share and steal some ideas from each other and things like that. But at the end of next week, the other thing that I think would be good is to come out of that with a better idea of how to put this into practice. And then 2 things. When our sort of trial period is done. Like, how many weeks do we want to take? Well, we're just testing some things out and trying some different things. And then how long we want to put something into practice for. So it could be the next, 3 months, 6 months, 9 months, whatever that looks like for you. And then the next thing coming out of that time, so we want to be thinking about that before we get there. Who can I share this with? Maybe there's someone that I want to walk through and say, hey, I just did this rule of life. I think it would be really helpful for you, and we can do it together. Or just someone in like Connor and I did this together, and we would ask each other. I would say, hey, how's your rule of life going? Can you ask me about mine? Let's meet back up, in 6 months as we're still meeting. Let's compare again and see how that's going. So we pick a person or a small group of people that you can think of who you can just say, hey, if I ask you to ask me about this, will you do that? And then will you give me some feedback? Just how's that going? How does that sound? Have you thought about this? Right. So we just want to think through the rule of life and the timeline, and then maybe a person or a couple people to share with, just to build in a little bit of accountability. And so that we're not in August going, I did that in January, but I haven't done anything with it since, right? Like, there's some follow-up that happens ongoing. Does that sound good?
Sounds like a plan.
Very cool. All right. Well, let me pray for us, and then we'll wrap up tonight. So, Father, thank you for this call, the ability to be together and to follow you, Jesus, and thank you for the grace to mess up and to kind of fail forward, to figure this out. We're in this global pandemic, and there's just changes at every turn, and nothing really is certain. And yet we know you're our constant, and your mission and your call in our life has not changed. And so this is really in light of all those things, God, that we're wanting to put these practices in place to be with you, to be like you, and to do the things that you're doing. So would you help us as we're forming this? Would you just help us to internalize this and extend grace to us to as we figure this out? Give us wisdom as we fill this out. And I pray this in Jesus' name. Amen. Amen.